A fin whale washed up on a Puerto Penasco beach. He was rescued in a heroic effort and returned to the sea. But victory was short-lived. 4 days later, another fin whale has turned up dead in this place we love. What in the world could cause this? What may be going on with fin whales? We will explore these questions and more as we talk with a whale rescue expert on this somber but still special episode of the Rocky Point Podcast.
Welcome, Puerto Penasco lovers. This is the Rocky Point Podcast with award-winning host Thomas Baldrick.
Hello, I'm Thomas Baldrick. Rocky Point, Mexico gets a couple million visitors each year to its beautiful beaches. But this episode, this is about two unexpected visitors. Perhaps you heard about the two fin whales washing up on the beach in the Mirador section. I'm sure you had questions. I did too. But I don't have the answers. However, I've reached out to someone who does. I found a really cool whale rescue expert. I got his insights and got an awful lot of information that I think you'll enjoy. When whales in California have problems, Justin Viezbicke is their go-to guy. He is an important member of the NOAA fisheries, part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. All right, sir, let's do the personal piece first, because I know you are a Rocky Pointer, but a long overdue one.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been down in the area, but I grew up in Colorado. And so when spring break season would come around, a lot of us high schoolers, we were looking for a way to get to the ocean. And one of the closest places was Rocky Point. And so that is one place that we would drive down to and spend some time enjoying the beautiful water and scenery as compared to our relatively cold Colorado Springs.
Professionally, will you give people some insight into what your current position is and what exactly you do?
Sure. So I am the California Marine Mammal Stranding Coordinator for NOAA Fisheries. So I do work for the federal government under the Department of Commerce and NOAA. I'm in the Protected Resources Division, and my job is to help facilitate and manage our marine mammal strandings that occur in California, as well as run the large whale entanglement response program that we have going on.
As someone who helps and works with whales, let me ask you, what is it about them that gets you and seemingly so many of us to love these giants of the sea?
I think for me in particular, because I grew up in Colorado and I was landlocked, there wasn't a whole lot of exposure to these types of things. And so when my parents took me out to San Diego and I went to SeaWorld for the first time and went out and did some whale watching and just saw, one, how big these animals actually are. And it's only for a few fleeting seconds and then they're gone again. And so it creates this real intense curiosity around these animals. And, we throw around the term in our office all the time, charismatic megafauna. For some reason, people just love whales. And I think, again, a lot of it has to do with the mystery and the unknown that kind of goes along with them.
This latest news in Puerto Penasco involved two fin whales. Now, I know I can only ask your opinions and insights because you were not directly involved, but what can you tell us about fin whales?
Well, fin whales. So yeah, they are actually the second largest mammal on the planet, only behind blue whales. So they can grow up to about 80 feet long. So they're really large whales. They are listed as endangered on the endangered species list. And kind of some interesting stuff about, fin whales in particular in relation to the Gulf of California is that it's sounding more and more like there may actually be a resident population of fin whales in the Gulf of California. They're really normally thought of as highly migratory, species that spend a lot of time moving around and following their food. But some recent research in 2019 from Oregon State is showing that there may actually be up to about 600 or 700 individuals that may call the Gulf of California home. So they're really kind of an amazing species. And obviously we still have a lot to learn about them.
Now that is fascinating to me because in just a moment, I was going to ask you, what do you think about fin whales being where they were found, considering the whale migration season for this area is normally late December through maybe mid-March? But this study Now that might explain it.
Yeah, well, I think that's the key, is that if they are residents there, then they're not migrating. They're just hanging out there. And, it does sound like from the paper that, different areas in the Gulf are productive at different times, depending upon currents and winds and those types of things. And so these whales, may potentially be able to move around within the Gulf and find the food that they need. So it's, I think in relation to the paper and some of this newer information, it's not strange to find them there this time of year, because we are learning more about them.
The rescued whale was said to be a male, about 10 months old, about 10 meters or 30 feet long, and weighing about 5 tons. Based on that information, what do you think might be some of the reasons he wound up on the beach?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And again, that's, what the Stranding Network really tries to do. And for, for whales that come ashore, it can be a lot like people, just like any of us. You can have heart failure, kidney failure, lung problems. You could get a sickness. You could have a bacterial infection. You could have a viral infection. Then there's also cases where, those are things that kind of happen on their own. Then there's other things that we look at that we call human interaction. And for instance, we just dealt with 2 dead fin whales that came in on the bow of a ship in the port of San Diego a couple of months ago. And so there are things like ship strikes, entanglements that can be an issue for these animals. There's a whole slew of things that could really lead them to coming up on the beach. And that's why it's super important for us to figure it out. Is it something that we're, as humans, that we're actually causing? Or is it something that there's really nothing we could do about it, that just genetically speaking, this whale had a bad heart? We just don't know. The other part about this one is it's really young. And so when you start talking about young animals, you talk about dependency on their mothers, in particular for food. And so if mom somehow was gone or something happened to her, or they got separated and calf wasn't getting the food that it needed, it's going to become exhausted, just like a person would. You're not eating the food that you need. Your body's going to start to shut down, and you're surviving off of your fat and your muscle, and that eventually will end up killing you. And so, unfortunately, without all the testing and what we would call a necropsy, it's really difficult to say. But there's quite a wide array of things that can bring whales to shore. If it's 2 relatively young animals, then we're talking about 2 separations or potentially 2 moms that we're missing, because we typically only have 1 calf. So, again, really hard to say, what's going on. But, it always leaves us, these types of situations leave us with a ton of questions. Absolutely.
Let me quickly revisit the size of the whale. I understand how to measure length, obviously. But how do you determine a whale's weight and a whale's age when it washes up on a beach?
Well, the weight, we're really lucky these days because some awesome scientists and folks that are out on the East Coast, they actually developed a whale scale for us. And so we put in the length, and then it gives us an estimated weight. But that's typically how it's done for most species of whales, is that we're basically estimating weight. And it has to do with different factors. Like, for humpback whales, we say that about every foot of humpback whale, that if you were to take a cross-sectional slice, is about 2,000 pounds. And so, a full-grown humpback whale that's 35 feet long can weigh up to about 75,000 pounds. But again, for every whale, it's a little bit different. And it really is, a lot of what we can determine, especially for these species that we don't see very often, is based upon what we find when we do a necropsy, and when we're able to take them apart and weigh them, piece by piece, and get, a more ideal estimate of what the weight is. Or sometimes we get super lucky and it actually fits on a truck, and we can actually go to a weighing station and then look at that weight. And so there's a couple different ways, but, a lot of it is really through science and just how we go, have the opportunities to look at these whales when they are dead.
And on that subject of weight, you blew my mind telling me about the vast differences between a whale's weight when it's in the water or when it's stranded on the land. Will you explain?
Yeah, most people don't think about it, but gravity has a massive effect on you. Imagine, just like you and I, when you go jump in the water and you're floating around, you feel light. You feel like you don't feel that pressure. Your back, especially for people that have back problems, a lot of them like to get in the water because it takes off that weight bearing. So think about whales. You're out there swimming around for your entire life, and all of a sudden you're on shore. Now you're dealing with gravity. Oh, and by the way, you weigh 70,000 pounds. And while you have very dense and big bone structure, it's not made to support your weight on shore. And so that's a huge problem that we see with whales. And typically why when we look at time that they can be successfully gotten off of shore, if it's even possible, it's a relatively small window because, a whale supporting its own weight for 24 hours, that in itself can be detrimental to the animal up to and including death, because again, they're just not used to supporting all of that weight on their body. Makes it harder to breathe, can squish things, organs can get messed up, and overall, it can cause a lot of problems.
We'll be back with more in a moment. This is the Rocky Point Podcast.
When the beach is calling, you escape to Rocky Point for fun and relaxation. And now, when you're tired of paying billionaire corporations those high online booking and service fees, you can escape to Rocky Point Direct. Exclusively Puerto Peñasco, Rocky Point Direct is your new local and low-cost online solution, great for both rental property hosts and visiting guests. Designed by a fellow Rocky Pointer, it supports only this destination we all love. Start keeping more money in your purse or pocket, or have more for treating yourself. Enjoy tacos, tequila, a massage, staying an extra night, or anything supporting this local community which needs us. Isn't it time to say adios, high fees? Create a free host or guest account at the new Rocky Point Direct. Just Google it. Go local with Rocky Point Direct.
Hola, this is Thomas Baldrick, here to talk real world wants and needs. You want to go to Mexico. We all do. You don't want to be forced into buying Mexican insurance. We all don't. But the fact is, we absolutely need it because it is now required by law. You never want to get into a car accident, but they do happen in Mexico, and they don't come with a text alert. Do you want to risk your vehicle, your body, all your assets, and maybe even your freedom? Trust me, with all that riding, you need to be smart. Do you want to get caught with the wrong policy and a worthless piece of paper you got from some shack on the side of the road because it had a bathroom? Or from a gas station clerk because you also wanted some snacks? That stuff works if you don't have an accident. Come on now, you don't get your full-time car insurance at home from your neighborhood Circle K or 7-Eleven, do you? No. So protect yourself and your future and only buy Mexican insurance from a true expert. A while back, our Sonoran Sun 510 East condo guest wanted my referral for Mexican insurance, so I had to search for one. Guess what I found? Most of the companies I called didn't even answer the phone or return my calls. Imagine that were you in Mexico and you got into an accident or needed roadside assistance. Yes, I was lucky to find Charles Lundy of MexInsurance.com. I use him myself, and I only refer to him. He's been in business for decades. Mex Insurance is licensed and bonded and bilingual. Charles and I have become friends. We talk on the phone, we meet in person. We even did an episode of the Rocky Point Podcast together on what you need to know about Mexican insurance. Before you drive, just log on, get a quote, get the right policy for you, and use the code RP for Rocky Point so they know you are with me. Think about it this way before you go. Would you rather have the right protection and peace of mind with MexInsurance.com but not need it? Or would you rather need coverage from MexInsurance.com but not have it?
Now back to the Rocky Point Podcast.
I know you've seen photos of the rescue effort, and it was, in fact, tremendous. There were Mexican Marine and beach officials, the bomberos were involved, the firemen, there were soldiers, and plenty of civilians. They spent about 5 hours trying to keep the whale hydrated and waiting for the tide to help get him back out to sea. Now, they said they followed all of the proper protocols for a beached mammal like this. What are those protocols?
So typically for large whales, given that they're too big to be able to typically move, we really do what we can to keep them out of the sun, keep them wet as possible, and keep their blowholes clear, trying to keep the area around the whale as calm as possible, just because, again, they've never even really been around humans before in most cases. So now all of a sudden they're on the beach and they've got all this activity going on and they're not feeling well. So really just trying to minimize the things that are going on around it while at the same time keeping it wet and out of the sun, because just like humans, they can get sunburnt, and that, sitting in the sun can almost start to cook them, because again, they've got a big layer of blubber, and so they will heat up and overheat relatively quickly. These whales actually what we call thermal dumping via their extremities, their dorsal fin, their tail flukes, their flippers. They will use those areas to run the blood and cool the blood, and then keep their core of their body temperature, where it needs to be. But when they're not in the water, they can't do any of that cooling on their own, and they will overheat. Most cases where we have whales on the beach, it's kind of somber, because the reality is, and I've been doing this for a number of years, there are very, very few animals that we actually get off the beach that we know successfully survive. Sometimes we get them off, but they don't show up anywhere. Could they have been lost? Could they have died and gone to the bottom? We just don't know. And so ultimately, it's one of those things where we don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to do very well. Cases like the one we're dealing with in San Diego right now with entangled whales, when we're out on those, that one's a little bit more, we're really hoping that we can do something that's going to make a difference for this whale. There is hope, and there is a chance that this whale can survive if we can do something about that gear that's on it. And so I'd say it's a little bit more hopeful in those scenarios, because again, in reality, most of the times when we find these large whales on shore, they're unfortunately there for a reason, and that reason is usually to die. There's a lot of risk involved. And so, we want to kind of figure that out. If these whales don't have a chance of getting off the shore, then we really just want to do our best to do some hospice care. If they do have a chance, then absolutely, we're going to look for ways to get them off the beach. But that's the really tricky part, is that, how do you get a whale that's that heavy off of the beach without waiting for the tides? You really have to wait for tides, because pulling, I get asked this every time. Should we tie a line around it and pull it back out into the water? Well, again, it weighs 70,000 pounds. It's feeling the effects of gravity, and now you want to try to pull it across the beach. We do not recommend that, because it can separate their spine. It can cause really bad damage to the animals. So really, it is just doing our best to leave them on the beach and keep them as comfortable as possible.
It seems to me the only easy thing to do here is speculate. The Sea of Cortez, Gulf of California, is so big and deep, it must be incredibly difficult to discover exactly what happened, what is happening, and why. We may never know. Am I close on this?
Well, I think it's definitely fair to say, for the ones that are already dead and we didn't get to necropsy and take a look at, we probably will never know for sure what it was that killed them. But I do think that, over time, through science and through the ability for our teams to get out, and there are teams in Mexico that do work on this, and there's a number of universities and scientists that participate in these things, is hopefully we can actually get some more information and take a look to figure out, is this, again, something that's human caused, like vessel strikes? Or is this something that's, something in the water? Is there a viral, problem going on out there? Is there, something that's happening that we might be able to do something about? But I'll be honest with you, in most cases for large whales, even if it is something, what and how do you do that? Because again, these are such large whales that we only see at the surface every couple of minutes. And it's just, again, we don't have a lot of exposure and knowledge about, what and how they do things still.
Final question for you, sir. I believe there is much good that can come from these whales reaching the beach. But let me ask for your thoughts as a person who works with whales, who studies them, and who also has a human perspective.
So I think from the science standpoint, the good that comes from it is that we're able to learn about individual species, about individual animals. We hopefully learn about why, what's going on out there. And quite honestly, they're the canaries in the coal mine. We're using the same water, we're eating some of the same fish. These are things that, if it's affecting them, they could be potentially affecting humans in the future. So that's on the science side. I think on the people human side of things, I watched the video, and at the end, seeing everybody, high-fiving each other and cheering and congratulating each other. I think that, I don't know, anytime I can see things where people actually, especially in this day and age where it's so easy to criticize and point fingers at other people and everybody wants to blame everybody else, when there is an opportunity where people can actually work together and have a common goal, because they do, like you said, they do care about these animals so much that they're willing to overlook everything else that's going on even their own safety in a lot of people's cases, because they care so much that they're going to do whatever it takes. And if that means working with people you wouldn't normally work with or whatever, I mean, but people are able to overcome those differences. And I just think it's kind of one of those shining examples where I wish we could see more of it and highlight more of it. Because there's probably a lot more of it going on out there, but we're so focused in the media these days on sensational clickbait that is negative that, it's almost kind of, morbid that we're so fascinated with all the bad stuff. But at the same time, there's really a lot of good things going on out there. And so I think this is just another great example of how people truly can work together for a common goal about things they care about. These opportunities are really rare. And so it's one of those things that we do want to be able to reach out. And be honest, I grew up in Colorado. I was never, I didn't know half of the things that were going on in relation to the ocean because we were landlocked. And so I think, for me, I really look for these opportunities to provide information to folks that don't hear about these things every day because, again, they're not close to the ocean and they probably are very interested and would be curious about it. And so it's just, again, another one of those great opportunities to communicate. And that's part of what NOAA's job is to do, is to let the public know what's going on so they can hopefully make better informed decisions on their own.
Thank you, Justin Viezbicke, for not only your time today, but for the time you put in and day out to work with the whales, try to save them, and of course, learn from them. I sure learned from you, and I know other people have as well. And a special thanks also to all of you who worked in trying to save that fin whale's life. My goodness, your efforts were fantastic, and regardless of what happens or happened to that whale, your efforts were not in vain. I thank you. Thousands of people thank you, and I sure hope you feel proud for what you did and what you chose to do. And as always, thanks to you for being with us. And before I let you go, mercifully, let me point out something that I think is really good that came from that first whale washing up on the beach because of the rescue effort. Did you notice no one asked or cared if that whale was Mexican or American? No one cared about the people trying to save his life if they were Mexican or American. No one asked or cared who was a conservative loyal to Donald Trump or who was a liberal who would never vote for him again. No one cared anything, whether somebody was gay or straight, Catholic or Muslim. They just cared about trying to keep this whale alive. Thank you, folks, for your kindness, your compassion. It was a great start for all of us. Do we need more? Yes. Can we do more? Yes. It starts with me, and it starts with you. That's going to wrap things up for now. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and download and enjoy other episodes, or follow us on Facebook to get notifications when new episodes are online. Whatever you do, just stay connected with us, please, and share it with your friends if you like. I'm Thomas Baldrick. Adios, friends. We'll look for you again next time on the Rocky Point Podcast.